Anyway, let's get on to it. Tell me about your book.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. So I I'm on my fifth book, but my first novel. It's called The Tribes of Yggdrasil, and basically it's a fiction novel that takes place about 128 years in our future, potentially. And it draws very heavily on Norse mythology and incorporates, a lot of really exciting themes that appeal to me and appeal to a lot of people. If you think Star Wars meets Lord of the Rings meets Stargate, you've got a good idea of the kind of theme and tone of the book that I'm writing. And that's the first book. I'm actually working on the second book in the series at the moment. But yeah, it's really exciting. The series is called The Tribes of Yggdrasil. And for people familiar with Norse mythology, you'll know that Yggdrasil is this world tree. It's like the central, spine of the multiverse. And the first title is called Dawning of the Wolf Age.
Fantastic. Where do you find your muse for this type of writing?
Well, so writing for me has always been something I wanted to do since I was a young lad. I wrote poetry and, of course, I read voraciously, but my muse has always been to tell interesting stories. The stories that weren't getting told, maybe an aspect of a certain story or, going off and adventuring in a different planet. And that's one of the things when I was a kid that drew me to role playing and, Dungeons and Dragons and Star Frontiers, things back in the 80s. This is because I wanted to explore these milieus in my own mind and in my own way. And writing is incredible because it lets you do that. It lets you not only explore these things, but build them as you go, which, is pretty incredible. It's a lot of fun. So, the desire to tell new and interesting stories, that's really what drives my writing.
Okay. So when you're trying to come up with an idea, where do these ideas for the world settings come from? How do you do your world building? How do you do your character building?
Yeah, so world building is a lot of fun. And that's something I spent actually months on before I even started writing the first novel, because I wanted to really carefully incorporate a lot of solid Norse mythology. So I wanted to take what was already there in the epic poetry from 1,000 years ago and project that into the future. So I'd spent a lot of time, reading everything I could on all the different sagas and all the different Norse myths, as well as then looking at, scientific papers on, exogeology and exoplanetology and all the things we've discovered in the Kepler mission, for example, with all these new planets. And so some of the planets in my novel are actually Kepler candidates, like Kepler 22b, for example, is Alfheim. So, I've taken mythology and combined that with some science to try to, to tell something very interesting, but still have, still have real hooks and ties into what we know.
Very interesting. I remember that when I was producing a game called Rapture, that we did something very similar, except of North mythology. I took the Bible as absolutely literal, and the world building. Once you start to blend real science with whatever, you start to get. That's where some real ideas start to bubble out. What sort of ideas bubbled out for you? What were the wow factors for you?
Well, that's a good question. I think some of the most interesting things were just details of some of the worlds that maybe I wanted to visit that, that I hadn't had an opportunity to visit in either movie, film, television, games, or whatnot. So, I'm able to go to new planets and new places and also create new technology, for example. So I think those are kind of fun things that just bubble out of this.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's, yeah, go ahead.
You're a bit of an explorer then, aren't you? I've heard this term before, that a lot of people involved in this they're the frustrated explorers. There's no more new lands to explore on Earth, so we got to create our own to explore.
Absolutely. And in my corporate job, my previous incarnation in life, I've traveled all over the planet. I've worked in Asia, I've worked all over Europe, I worked in England for a while. So I've literally been around the globe many times. And yeah, I lament that we don't have any more frontiers to explore into. So I think it's incumbent on us writers to build and design those new frontiers until, NASA and SpaceX and whatnot get us out to Mars or some other frontier. I think we're going to have to work hard to design these things ourselves and have some fun doing it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, very much a man of my thinking, I can tell. Okay, so if I was a budding writer, if I have this idea circulating in my head and I want to put pen to paper or want to go out there and talk to a publisher, where do I start? Where was your journey?
So, so the first thing, as a new writer, I think you have to realize whether you've got a good idea or not. And that's where a lot of people just kind of fall down and stop because they don't have the confidence to go ahead with whatever, they're thinking of doing. And you've got to realize that so many authors think that. There was, so many of the great books got rejected dozens and dozens of times. And finally, a publisher would latch onto it and, and it had become famous and now they're classics, right? Yeah. So you've got to have a good story to tell. That's number one. The second thing is you've got to have confidence and just do it, and be passionate about it. You've got to really want it. Writing's not for everybody. It's not a career that, the masses are not necessarily going to flock to, but there are some people that are just born to want to tell stories. And for those people, you really can't do anything else. It's going to be a compelling urge to, to talk about these things and explore these things.
Fantastic. There are many, many authors out there who confront their fears and they actually start to put pen to paper. The next step is actually taking that and going through the whole production cycle of getting a book published. So, yeah. What would be your recommendations on that?
So, there are several avenues, obviously. I mean, you still have the traditional publishing avenue. You can go and, look for a literary agent and go approach publishing houses. Mm-hmm. For my very first book, I chose not to do that because it can be a very long process. There are hundreds of thousands of people every year submitting manuscripts to, tons and tons of publishing houses and literary agents. So the technology we've got now is absolutely brilliant to self-publish. I mean, it's an absolute revolution. I'm now making, a full-time living as an author independently. I don't belong to any publishing house, and I do everything myself. And so I'm well suited for that, but, not everybody is. So you've got to make the decision of whether you have all the skills to publish a book yourself. Writing it is one thing, but then you've obviously got the editing of it, which is very important. And for my friends who are budding authors out there, do not edit your own book. You must go get an editor, even if it's another person in your family or whatever at the very least. But that's one of the cardinal sins of publishing your own book is editing it yourself. I've seen too many independent books just crippled by, grammatical mistakes and punctuation and things like that that are very distracting for the reader. So that's very important.
Actually, just with that,
then
just with the editor, did you go out and get a professional editor, or did you lean on a friend? How did you actually go about that, and how long did it take?
Well, I'm very lucky. My wife does this professionally. So she edited my book. She was a professional at a publishing house, or at a printing house rather, and so she did this thing all the time. So I was very lucky. But you can expect to pay $500, $1,000 for a standard editing service for a typical novel. So, it's pricey for a person starting out that's independent. It is a big expense. But I think if you're going to spend any money, that's the very best place to spend it.
Right. Because
the quality of the book, I mean, that's really going to sell your book, is if it's written well and then edited well and presented well. Those are the keys.
So after editing, you get to what stage of, would it be the presentation of the book, the cover?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. You've obviously got, some kind of packaging. Even in an ebook, you want a really good cover because people still look at those. If you go on Amazon and you look at a book, I can guarantee that something with an ugly cover is going to get passed over quickly, unless it's free. But, yeah, covers are very important. And you shouldn't skimp on that either. That's another area where there's all kinds of good artists these days that'll do a reasonable job and make you a reasonable price at some very nice art.
What other advice can you give a budding author about getting their product to be a bestseller? So you've got to build a fan base. Once you've got a good book, it's well written, it's attractively packaged, it's immaculately edited, you've got to build a following. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I don't think there's any tricks. You've got to talk to a lot of people, and whether that's via social media, Facebook, Twitter,
face-to-face, Google Hangouts, Google Plus, whatever. But you've got to be talking to people all the time, every day, and not spamming them with just repetitive garbage. You've got to be giving them something interesting. So, if you're writing a book on Norse mythology, you should be sharing interesting and relevant snippets or articles on that topic. If you're writing science fiction, give them short stories for free. One of the things I do is write a short story every month or two, and I offer it free on Kindle for 5 days every 3 months. So, and I've got a whole bunch of them. So basically, every week I have a free short story out on Kindle for people to have. So that's one thing I do, is make sure that people have something interesting to go to that's free, and it helps build relationships with the people and let them know what your work is like. And then hopefully they'll spend some money and buy a book or, a larger piece of work or whatnot.
Right. Now, you said that you're now doing this full time. How did that transition go for you? Was it scary? Was it challenging? And if I was a budding author thinking about making that transition, what would you advise them, or what would you advise them not to do?
So I would say, don't quit your day job and and try to publish a book. I worked in the corporate world for, 17, 18 years before I wrote my first book. And I was thinking of leaving the corporate world. I wanted to do something more creative. I wasn't necessarily thinking about writing. I was just really just exploring options. And so I ended up moving to a smaller corporation because I wanted to be more creative, more hands-on. And I left the second biggest software company in the world, I won't name names, and moved to a smaller startup for some new challenges. And about a year and a half after I moved, they ended up laying everybody off. So here I am, 38 years old, very well paid, now unemployed. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna take a minute and I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna go write a book. This is a golden opportunity, because I would never have quit my job willingly. I just, I had mortgage, 2 cars, and I was the sole income earner in the family. But and a lot of people have said that, when they get laid off or whatever, and it sparks a new career. And that's exactly what happened for me. It's not for everybody. But anyway, I took 9 months and wrote my first nonfiction book, and it did really well. And after about 6 months of sales, I decided that, I could actually make a go of this. And so I made the decision to move back from the US to Canada, where I'm from, because we have free healthcare and a bunch of other things that a self-employed author needs. So I moved home to Canada, and for the first year or so, I did half web design and half writing. It was a 50-50 split, so I could still pay the bills. And it finally got to the point where I had enough books and enough sales that I could do it full time, which is what I'm doing now. Now, I'm not making anything like I was in the corporate world. I'm not flush with cash. I don't have a new car every year like I used to. But, I'm doing what I like every day, and it's great.
Actually, there's a wonderful... I had a very similar journey, and one of the things I will say, and I'll add to this, is that life is going to end. It's very short. You better enjoy it. And if money's, the big income's not doing it for you, then you better find out what you truly love. And for me, definitely it involves writing and game playing and world building and all those explorations. And sometimes life just comes and says, right, you're going to have to do something different because you're fired, you're retrenched, whatever. And other times, it's very hard to make that decision. But like you, I think, having a little bit of a sideline business as well is very important. So you've really got to be a bit of multitasking there.
Yeah, I mean, it really is hard to make a living as a writer. It's really, really difficult. I mean, I work very hard at it now. I spend probably 4 to 5 hours a day marketing. And doing, like I said before in the interview, writing short stories to give away, talking to people, sharing interesting things on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So that's a big part of my day, is marketing and selling my books. Then, of course, I have to do the fulfillment. I have to keep writing every day. So it really is a full-time job, but I love it. So it's not hard work, for me. I mean, I'm sitting here in the evening and I'm working on my iPad, and I'm actually working. And what am I doing? I'm reading science fiction articles on designing new aliens and new technology. I mean, how cool is that, right? So
fantastic. So you love your life.
I love it. I love it. I couldn't ask for a better job. And, I would say that, oh gosh, I wish I had done this 20, 30 years ago. But no, I had a lot of very interesting experiences that kind of led me to this point and gave me enough kind of worldliness to take me to a point where I could, write and pull it all together and do it. So it's a perfect time for me. So Hopefully I'll
Fantastic.
have another 30 or 40 years of writing.
Terrific. Look, thank you very much for your time. You're absolutely inspirational, and I'm sure that everyone who watches this is going to get a lot out of it. Any last words for budding
Pleasure.
authors before we close off?
Like Nike says, just do it. Get out there, write your book, don't quit. If you love it, just go and write. Best
Perfect.
thing you'll ever do.